The spine, the thing that holds our body together, the main base of the human body that holds us up and keeps us standing. And in team sports, when we talk about the spine of the team, we're talking about the most vital parts that makes your side succeed. And what I'm going to be referring to in this video is what I believe to be the most influential positions in rugby union, where if you have an outstanding player in these positions, you could get by on having hard workers in the other positions. That is the level and the influence of these positions in the game. So join me, students. Your professor is here to define the spine of a rugby team. The first position that is part of the spine of the rugby team is the number 2, the hooker. This position is, in my opinion, the most thankless position in the spine of a rugby team. It has so many high pressure, highly difficult and extremely costly jobs to do, all whilst expected to be the most mobile member of the front row. So let's list the jobs that the hooker has to do. Number 1. Line-out throwing, the most thankless task in rugby, with the most eyes scrutinising and criticising. Having a decent set piece in the game of rugby union is just par for the course. It is expected, and anything below perfection is just seen as unacceptable, which is mental, but that's just the way the game has gone. And your line-out thrower is crucial to your team's success in the line-out. And speaking of the importance of the set piece, number 2. The scrum. Now the hooker's role is sort of implicit in the position's name, hooking the ball in the scrum. But in modern times, the actual hooking of the ball has become less and less necessary, due to nines literally feeding the ball into the second row. But whatever your views on that, the hooker's role of hooker in scrummaging has become more and more about supporting your fellow front row union buddies in whatever way you can, especially the tighthead, who needs to be the anchor of the scrum. And now that all that set piece talk is out of the way, it's time to get onto the hooker's jobs in open play. Number 3, the clear-up. So hookers in rugby, depending on skill level and body type, are used for various different jobs around the park, and it's usually filling in the gaps that a team has. Thus, I've dubbed these jobs as the clear-up. For example, in New Zealand, due to the fact that hookers over there tend to be extremely mobile, they will be stationed in the wide channels. This does two things. It allows for a physical ball carrier to be in the wide channels, but it also does give you a very effective clear out when your backs get tackled in that 15-metre channel, allowing you to get a lot quicker ball than if a back was clearing it out. There are loads of jobs like this that hookers are tasked with, including blindside defence. It seems that when a team has an issue in offence or defence, nothing can't be sorted by bringing in your hooker. And that concludes the first position in the spine of the rugby team. Now onto the other front row union member, the tighthead prop. So when I was younger and a mere student of the game, rather than the fully fledged professor that you're letting impregnate your mind with nonsense, I was dumbfounded by a fact I found out about the professional game. And I will share this earth-shattering knowledge with you now. Tighthead prop is the highest paid position in rugby union. This was a bombshell to my 12-year-old mind. I had been a back all my short little child life and hadn't paid much attention to the scrum, as to me it was just where all the slow players who didn't pass played. But I was wrong. Tighthead prop is up there with the fly half in terms of most important positions on the pitch. Spoilers. And the reason for this is that the tighthead is the anchor of the scrum. And if you're wondering why the loose head prop isn't as important to the scrum, well, it's a lot more complicated than it should be, but all you need to know is that because all the people in the front row put their head to the left, it means that the loose head is free and has more license to put pressure on his opposition tighthead. And so the tighthead then has the opposition hooker and the opposition loose head being in a position that naturally makes them be able to push through you easier. So the tighthead prop's job is just to stand firm and keep the team's scrum stable and not to get pushed backwards. Needless to say, it's an extremely tough job and not one that can be done through sheer willpower alone. You need to be a big, strong boy, and your whole scrum falls apart if this position and player isn't pulling their weight, and that's why it's the highest paid position in the game. But this specific and incredibly difficult task does free the tightheads of a lot of responsibility other than this job, but you do have to have tightheads at the highest level who can get around the park as well. Examples of this are the way Carl Sinclair gets around and Ben Franks in his prime. And I doubt this cornerstone of rugby union won't continue to evolve, so all we can do is value and salute these mighty beasts who do this job that none of us mere mortals could dream of doing. And now we move on to the next position of the spine of the rugby team, the second row / line-out caller. Now this role in the spine of the team isn't as position specific as the others. This person can be a 4, a 5, a 6, whatever, but its main job is to be the main line-out organiser in general, but ideally it's your second row. Think your classic Paul O'Connell, Martin Johnson types. This player will also be expected to be a big ball carrying option and rock monster. The best modern example of this kind of player is the best second row ever, Brodie Retallick. a beast around the park with soft hands and a nuisance for opposition lineups. And what cannot be understated is the role of a good second row in the scrum. The extremely taxing work of pumping their legs in the scrum and then being expected to carry like a back rower. It's a truly gruesome thought for a little man like myself, and a player who can do all of this is worth their weight in gold. Moving on to the last forward in the spine of the team, the back row talisman. Now again, this player isn't position specific. The back row talisman can play any of the back row positions, blindside, open side, number 8, all are welcome, but in the spine of a rugby team, only one can be the back row talisman. Ideally, it's your number 8. Think your Kieran Reeds or Billy Vunipolas of this world, players that can lead their team forward and are talismen who inspire their fellow teammates to go forward. But in other positions, this can still be achieved with players like David Pocock, Richie McCaw, whose work around the field does exactly the same thing. When Jerome Kaino plays for any other team but the All Blacks, he fills this role as well from the blindside flank. Players who can do it all and will do anything for their team are what you're looking for to fill this role in the spine of your team. Now, on to the player who links all these wonderful big blokes to the slightly smaller blokes in the team, the scrum-half. Now, I think the role of scrum-half is criminally underrated and undervalued by people, but I think I can identify the reason why this is the case. Basically, you don't realise the importance of having a good scrum-half until you have a really good or world-class scrum-half. Now, my examples of people who have done this for their clubs and have shone some light on the value of having someone who can be the heartbeat of your team and set the tempo, not just in attack but also bring the energy in the defence, are South African talisman Cobus Reinach and current South African number 19 Faf de Klerk. Both these men have become indispensable for their teams and in my opinion have taken scrum-half play standards in the Premiership to a whole new level. They are the benchmark for what you can do in the 9 jersey. But back on to why a scrum-half is part of the spine of a rugby team. Put simply, it's the player who is the link between the forwards and the backs, from most rucks to whoever's carrying, and that person must be of a certain standard. And I haven't even got into the importance of box kicking in rugby, with teams getting fitter and standards of play getting higher and higher. Exiting your 22 has become almost its own separate mini-game in rugby, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, and when you're putting a team together, the scrum-half's role is a vital cog in a rugby team machine. Now we move on to the other halfback, who has a vital role to play in rugby union, the fly half. The quarterback, the man who steers the ship, usually one of the team's main kickers, and the man who dictates the way every other player in the span of the team plays in attack. I feel like the fly half's importance to the team is pretty self-explanatory, but let me just paint a little picture for you now to make it absolutely clear. Whether your team goes off the top of the line out or drives, fly half's decision. Whether your team hit up in the middle or go wide on first phase, fly half's decision. Every move coming off a ruck, fly half's decision. Now obviously for some things he or she may defer to players he or she trusts in various positions, but other than that it's all on this person to make the team tick. And that's also why it's extremely hard to find good young fly halves who are comfortable in the high pressure environment of professional rugby, making these calls and bossing people around. It's stressful, difficult and sometimes not a very pleasant job to do, but in attack it's probably the most important, except maybe in France where they somehow have the scrum half call moves, although that is dying out now. But back on message, an often overlooked part of the role of fly half is the way that the team responds to a certain individual. And what I mean by that is, when you are in a team and you have all your players in different positions getting into a rhythm and a consistent first 15, if you remove any player from that, it disrupts the flow of the team. It just does, that's the way the human mind works. You have to trust who you're playing with, and that takes time, and that's just the way things are, whether it's the loose head, flanker, winger, anyone. But the effect of that disruption depends on the position, with the players in the positions I've discussed already, and another to come being the most disruptive to the team's chemistry. And the fly half, in my opinion, is the most disruptive when it changes, because if your scrum half is like your heartbeat that keeps you moving, your fly half is your brain, the thing that makes your decision and tries to steer you in the right direction. And when the brain changes, it takes some getting used to, which is the second stupidest metaphor I've ever graced your ears with. Bottom line, being a 10 is hard, and when you have a good one, hold on to them for dear life, because when you have one that suits your team, they're a nightmare to replace, even if you have excellent replacements. Looking at you, Wasps. And now that we've talked about the brain of the team, let's talk about our final entry to the spine of the team, the eyes, the inside centre. Now the inside centre is a role that is undervalued to the casual fan of the sport, so I intend to dedicate an entire video to explaining its importance, but I will leave you with this. The inside centre must get the team going forward, by any means at his disposal. And that's where we'll leave it for now, students. But make sure you attend my next class. Signed NGJ. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe and turn the notification bell on to let you know when I upload. You can also follow me on social media at NGJ Rugby. Thank you again, and see you around.